Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to tell you about something that I have just launched. Just in the last day or two, I will have launched a brand new niche site training course. In fact, it's geared specifically for driving Google organic traffic to your website. So I teach you step by step how to build your site, get traffic from Google, make sure it ranks well, and do all of those steps in between so that you can start making money from your website. To find out more about this in-depth training course that I've created, you can go to nichepursuits.com/training. Again, that's nichepursuits.com/training. And in today's episode, I actually interviewed Jake Cain. He's one of the coaches as part of Organic Traffic Formula, the course that I've just created. So you can hear his story, but also know that if you want to hear more from Jake, you can go over to nichepursuits.com/training and see the video modules that we've done together to get that in-depth training on how to build your own successful website. Thanks a lot. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Hawes from nichepursuits.com, of course. And today I'm excited to bring you an interview. It's not an interview with just anybody, but it's actually our very own Jake Cain. He's been on the podcast as a co-host a number of times, but we have not dug into his history, his background, his success that he's been having very much during those podcasts. But today, he's in the hot seat, and we're going to do that. So, Jake, with that, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I'm humbled and proud to be in this seat across from you being interviewed. This is great. Thank you.
You are very welcome. So, you need to deliver because you are a co-host. We're expecting good things from you, so no pressure.
Right. Of course, yeah.
No, I'm teasing. Jake and I are on calls all the time. We know each other very well. So, of course, I know his background and his history of building sites. But I don't think a lot of listeners here on the podcast do know what that is. So, having said that, what made you start building your first site? What made you start dabbling in building businesses online?
You know what? I think I draw it back to a book that a lot of people in our space are familiar with and have probably read, which is The 4-Hour Workweek with Tim Ferriss. And I read that shortly after I got married in 2007. And it really just messed up my whole thought about what I was going into at the time. I was sort of getting started with a career and headed down the, I guess, traditional path. And that kind of ruined it for me, and it just sort of opened up a new mentality of, he talks a lot in the book about outsourcing things in your life and things like that. And from that point on, I just sort of became committed at that. I didn't know it was going to be niche websites and things like that at the time, but that got me on the journey of trying to figure out, okay, how can I escape the rat race? How can I do something other than, go work at something for 40 years and retire? And so that kind of became my mission. And so 2008, somewhere in that time frame, I think I came about Niche Pursuits. And that's when I started my first website, was 2008. So I may have came upon Niche Pursuits a year or two later when I was trying to figuring out why nobody was coming to my website. But that's sort of what got me started, man, the 4-Hour Workweek and living the big dream.
Yeah, that's interesting that when you see a different perspective or a world that you had never experienced before, it really can set your mind, get the wheels turning and make you think of, what if I did this, or what could my life be like if I did that? Yeah. And I think that is the case for a lot of people that either read that specific book, The 4-Hour Workweek, or I know for me, it was just, I think, reading a lot of things online. I don't even remember what I stumbled on for the first time, but just reading about people building websites and how does that work? It really led me down the rabbit hole of, making things work and building a business for myself. So back in 2007, 2008, you're building your first website. Were you done with college at that time, or were you still going to school? And what was your first job after college?
Yeah, I graduated in December of 2005 from Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee. I'm a proud Lee University flame. So I was out of school, living, I got married in 2007. So at the time, I was working at Citibank here in near Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, fielding phone calls when I got married. And it was horrible, doing customer service for a bank. Everybody's just calling in to yell at you about their overdraft fees and stuff like that. And it was miserable. So I think some people can relate to, if you're in a job that's miserable, that's very motivating.
Yeah.
To figure out, how can I get out of this as quickly as possible and still survive. And so I was doing that. And then fortunately, I found a better job around the beginning of 2008. Working for an education technology company that was very good to me. And I worked with them for, I guess, the next 6 or 7 years up until I started working with you. So that was a better job and was decent, but it's still, like I said, I kind of had that bug inside of me that I wanted to ultimately work for myself and sort of control my own destiny. And, 3 weeks of vacation was great, but I wanted to be able to take vacation when I wanted to. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was my ultimate goal. Always has been, still is, was freedom and control, more of time and doing the things that I want, even more than money. Money I saw as a means to get to that end. But to me, that was never the primary focus.
Right. So very good. Let's go back to that initial site that you built. And I don't know if you have shared or are willing to share that publicly. I think you've mentioned it in other places. So if you want to share it, we can talk about it specifically. But if not, that's okay too. But sort of that first site that you had, how long did it take before you started to see some traction? And was that first site really the one that sort of made you think, okay, this website building stuff, it can be a big deal?
Yeah. So the first site that I did, I have mentioned it in Facebook groups and stuff, is ballparksavvy.com. It's still out there. It's like the website that all my friends and stuff know about. So
right.
People that know that I do this, it's like what they ask me about. But it is essentially like a guide to every Major League Baseball stadium with the slant of helping you save money and like save time, find free parking, stuff like that, like ways to cut corners when you're going to a ball game.
Right.
And so, I had the idea. This was kind of pre-niche pursuit. So like I had that idea organically because I did a big baseball road trip with my dad that year. And in planning that trip, I found a lack of those kinds of resources. And so that's what gave me the idea to do the site. And so, it took at least a couple of years, probably more like 3 years before I really was making any amount of money. It was more just a thing that I really enjoyed. I went to a lot of games. And so it was more of a passion project at the time. But what really got me a kickstart in the early days, I remember getting excited when I would see 1 or 2 people come to my site in a day, which is kind of funny to look back on now. But you see like those first real people who aren't you that were reading your website is a pretty cool feeling. And I got on a local radio show here in Cincinnati, Sports Talk, on the big local, talk radio station. Like after a couple months after I started the site.
Wow.
And that was just like a cold email. I knew the host's name. I didn't know him, and just sent him an email. I just finished my Great American Ballpark guide, and I knew they kind of talked about random stuff on the site. And I said, hey, man, just finished this up and got some really cool tips about how to save money going to the Reds game because people are always complaining how expensive it is. He emailed me back. It's like, hey, yeah, when can you come on the show? And I was like, I about fell on the floor. So that was my first like big surge of traffic. And I just remember that was like a really cool, like motivating moment. I don't remember the numbers, but, I went from having maybe 5 people on my site the day before to, 600 or 700. And so I was like, I thought I'd die. And I probably made $0, but, but it was still really cool. And so, like as I started to see some momentum there, started to make a few bucks, throwing up AdSense. That's where I got a little bit deeper into it, started finding sites like Niche Pursuits, and then got a little bit more serious about it and thought about starting some other sites too.
All right. So to kind of bring at least your first site full circle, it took a couple of years before starting to make a little bit of money. Where's that site now roughly in terms of earnings? Has it ever been, a huge earner for you? Maybe you can give maybe what the peak was and what sort of it's doing now.
Yeah, that's it's really at its peak right now. Honestly, it's doing better than it ever has. The last few years have been really consistent. Obviously, it's seasonal, so it's April through October when baseball is being played. Outside of that, it's you can hear crickets on my website because nobody's coming to it. So it's got that aspect to it. But it'll make in the height of the summer, like it'll make few $1,000 a
Okay.
month, which is
Yeah.
great, you know. So
That's
it's
awesome.
yeah, it's kind of diverse. It's also like, I mean, I know that's a significant amount of money, but I also think of it as sort of a fun site because I use like my Airbnb refer a friend link on there in every city. And so like
Okay.
Airbnb will give you like $20 credit, like if you refer a friend and then they go stay somewhere. So I always just mention it as like an option if you're traveling to the game. And so I've had like thousands of dollars in Airbnb credit. So we've traveled and stayed
Nice.
places for free. And so, yeah, but I use like ticket affiliate websites and parking affiliate websites. So kind of unique stuff there that I don't do on any of my others. But yeah, it's a nice little site, man, and it's truly passive. Like
Yep.
last year, I hired a lady who was very knowledgeable. Her husband works for Major League Baseball, and she like did a thorough update of the site. But it's just kind of a matter of going through maybe annually and just kind of keeping things fresh. But it's pretty evergreen content overall, so it's been great.
Yeah, I love that story of that site, and I love that it's sort of at its peak right now. I think that's great. So, but I know that you've done a number of other things, of course. So let's you built that site, let's call it 2008, right?
Yep.
It's been 10
Yep.
years since then. I know you've built a number of sites. What do we want to talk about? We can talk about your most successful site right now, maybe when you started that. Or is there anything sort of in between you think that's useful for your story?
Yeah, there's a good one that's in between. So this is a site that is doing pretty well these days. I started it in 2011, so this was probably my next site, I guess. It's in a very boring topic that would be, I guess we could categorize it as like home services.
Mm-hmm.
And this site, I had started out and it was going okay. Like I had some content up on the site, and I had this idea one day. My sister teaches English here locally in Cincinnati, and for high school. And so I had this idea. We were talking over the summer, and she was kind of lamenting how much students hate their writing projects and writing assignments and stuff like that. And so at this time, I was all in on the keyword research and long tail pro, and I was in the niche pursuits mentality and the stuff that we teach all the time. So I was really a student of this and learning this stuff. And so I was telling her a little bit about that. And I said, what would be cool is if you let me come in to your high school English class and teach a bell on how to rank in Google. I was like, because these kids are writing this pointless stuff that you make them write, whatever,
Right.
autobiography on Alexander Hamilton or something or whatever, And so I said, why don't you let me come in, and I've got this site that they could kind of relate to, and I'll give them like an actual assignment and explain the whole why and how and the whole deal. And we'll track it throughout the school year. I'll report back and give them stats on how many people have seen their content. And she loved the idea. She was like, oh, it would be a huge hit. So anyway, I saw it as a cool opportunity to kind of spread the word and share, but also get some free content for my site. So I was like, hey, this will be a win-win. And so sure enough, I did it. Like at the beginning of the school year, it was around this time of year, September or something. I went in, taught a full bell on, it was like Spencer Hall's 101, like how to rank in Google, long tail keywords, the whole thing. And they were really eating it up. I mean, it was pretty cool. And at the end, there were 20 kids. There were 10th graders. There were 20 kids in the class, and I had pre-done keyword research. And so I'd found 20 good like long tail keywords in my niche.
Mm-hmm.
And I handed a different one out to each kid as like a writing prompt at the end. And so it was like a class assignment, like email this back to Jake, within 2 weeks or whatever. And so I'd given them instructions just like I would give a writer.
Yep.
And they did. And I sent feedback. Some of them did great. Some of them were not so great, the class clowns and such. And so sent feedback, and they sent revisions, the whole deal. Ultimately, I ended up publishing it under their name. And then I used Google Analytics, of course, and I would send video updates throughout the year and tell them, who was leading as far as the most traffic.
Nice.
And yeah, the biggest part of it was I promised when I was leaving that day, I was like, I'm going to come back at the end of the school year in May or whatever, and whoever has the most traffic, I'm going to give you $100 cash. And whoever's second place, I'm giving 50, and third, I'm giving 20 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so, to a high school student, that's a
big deal.
For $1 million, right? Yeah, so they're freaking out. So anyway, they were super excited and did a really good job. So I put that content up, and some of it did really, really well. Started ranking really well in Google. And so some of these kids had I I don't know, 60, 70,000 page views or something like that by the time I had come back. And so for a kid who had only written, again, kind of dumb term paper type stuff at this point in their life, to see that many people from around the world had seen their content, they were pretty blown away by it. And it was a pretty motivating thing. So anyway, that was really like big for the site, because it sort of cites some momentum. So from there, like I took it, and of course, since then I've not been using free student labor. I've been like paying writers and that whole thing, but it got me to recommit to the site to kind of take it to the next level. So I really went all in on content, and that site still today does really, really well.
Yeah, I love that story. I mean, it's got to be super interesting from a high schooler's perspective, right? To be able to hear from somebody that's using Google, how does a site rank in Google? And then, how does the content work? And have them actually write that content and be able to see the results. Hopefully was motivating for some of them. It would be interesting years later to follow up with some of those students to see if any of them have sort of built their own sites and do that sort of thing. I'd be kind of curious, but
really
don't know that there's a way to track them down. Yeah. In terms of that site, I mean, did you do any type of link building at all, or did you just literally put up the content that the students wrote?
Yeah, I just put up the content they wrote. At the time, I don't think I had done any link building. Since then, I've done a few different campaigns like here and there, and I've built a few links. But certainly, if you pulled up the metrics on the site, it is not a powerhouse by any means.
Right.
It's just the content and the keywords that have really driven the path forward there on that one for sure. But it's interesting, man. When I did that, and then even since then, like I've done career days and stuff like that. And like when you get into our world, you like assume that most people generally understand like why stuff ranks in Google because you just get so used to it. But I talk to educated people all the time who are like smart with it people. I'm not talking about grandma and grandpa, like high school students, right? They use the internet constantly. And the answers range so widely. Like they have no idea why stuff ranks in Google. And so, I would say for the people out there listening, if you're just getting started and you feel like overwhelmed, like I guess take some heart knowing that you're already ahead of like 90+% of the population and understanding this kind of stuff, So, most people are just clueless about it, which is just really interesting.
It is really interesting. I actually had thought about doing a mini series maybe on YouTube where I essentially ask people that question on video, just common everyday people, right? Just ask them, how do sites rank in Google? And just get their thoughts, right? I think it would be really interesting to see what everybody thinks about how a site ranks in Google, and then see if you can maybe explain to them, hey, this is how it actually works.
Right.
See if that clicks. But anyways, that's a little side note there. So a win for long tail keywords on that site, the student site that you built there. Let's maybe touch on that a little bit. Are you still, for the most part, focusing just on long tail keywords and great content? How important is a link building strategy in your overall sort of big picture of your business? Yeah, just to give people an idea. And then I do want to dive into your sort of biggest site that you have now.
It's not been I'm not a great link builder, I don't think. And I say that because I've never been systematic about it. Over the years, I've done some help a reporter out links, which is something I mention in different places, but it's just like a free email list that you can get on, and you get emails every day from journalists who are looking for a source at the last minute or maybe somebody to quote in a story. And so I'll get on that list and for different sites, kind of pretend to be an expert, I guess, and chime in. And sometimes I get published. And so I've picked up like some really powerful links doing that. Yep. But that's very just kind of when I feel like it. I don't do it every day by any means. And other than that, sometimes I'll just think of a really creative idea like, oh, I bet people would link to this. And so I'll do some infographic or something like that and just send some emails. But I've done a little bit of that, but it's certainly not been the core of any site that I've built
right.
at all.
Yep. No, that's kind of an interesting perspective as well. I guess me just thinking about, we're just talking about people that are totally clueless about how sites rank in Google, right? And then you kind of get the other end of the spectrum, or at least people that start diving into niche sites or SEO, they immediately think, well, you have to build links. Like that's the only way, right? Yeah. It's all about the links. So that's sort of one hand, people have no clue that links even matter to rank something in Google, to somebody that's all they care about. And they think you have to daily be building a bunch of links. But I'm with you in terms of, I have not always been a huge link builder. I focus more on finding those long tail keywords, producing great content, and then sort of sprinkling in some links as needed. And then picking up great natural links, of course, as your site starts to rank, people just find that and reference that anyway. So I think there's kind of a happy medium there.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like the sites that I have, probably the best links that I have on almost all of them are links that I didn't seek out. They just kind of found me, and I just discovered one day that somebody had linked to me. I'm like, oh, cool. So I kind of think of it the other way. If I can rank for enough long tail keywords and I start getting the traffic, that's more eyeballs on my content. And it's more people when they go Googling something on their own to look for something to link to or to reference in their article, they're going to find me because I'm ranking, And so, yeah, I picked up a lot of good natural links along the way, but I can't say it's through any intentional effort on my own.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Just yesterday, actually, I was looking at my own site, nichepursuits.com, on Ahrefs. I don't do this often, like at all. I don't look at the links hardly ever that are pointing to niche pursuits. But for a particular reason, I was looking at them and I was surprised. I got some really great links that I had no hand in playing whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
Like neilpatel.com, Forbes.com, entrepreneur.com, semrush.com. Anyway, several others like that have just mentioned my website. Like, I wasn't a guest interview. I didn't write the article. I didn't. So stuff like that happens. It really does. So for whatever particular niche that you're in, if you are producing great content, and it does help that, if you're getting up towards the top of Google, people that are writing articles are just researching stuff. They see you and they just link to you because they figure, hey, he's near the top of Google. He must deserve a link, right? I should reference him. So it sort of perpetuates itself once you do get up near the top of Google. So,
right.
Okay. Now I would like to jump into your most successful site that you have right now.
Sure.
Let's maybe give people an incentive to listen to this. Maybe you can first tell us, how well is this site doing? Maybe either in terms of traffic or income numbers. People, of course, do love to hear. Give us an idea. How well is this niche site that you have doing?
Yeah. So the site right now, the last couple of months, it's been growing really quickly. It's been doing what I would consider pretty well for the last 2.5, 3 years, but over the last 2-3 months, it's really taken off. So the last 2 months, we've had over $20,000 each month in revenue for this site, and getting just a rough idea, like over 10,000 sessions a day on this site. So I guess that's over 300,000 or so per month, just as far as traffic numbers. And so on pace to do about that again this month, as we're near the end of August. So yeah, it's going really, really well.
It's huge. Congrats, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's a great site. And of course, I've been able to sort of have the inside scoop. I knew when you started the site and have seen it over the years just continue to grow. And what you've done with the site is phenomenal. So you deserve, that success that you're having there.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
So why don't you tell us the story? Why did you build the site? When did you start the site?
Well, started it, I guess, a couple years after the last one that I mentioned. So I'm going to say around 2013, something like that is when it came into existence. Like the other site, came out of, guns a-blazing and writing all the content myself, and then didn't make any money in the first month. And so I got bored with it and started doing other stuff, I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, that seriously, I had put up like maybe 5 or 10 keyword focused articles, went into a space that had some items that were sold on Amazon that were really pricey. So that was sort of my reasoning for going into it. I was like, oh, if we could, rank for some of this stuff, like we'd make a lot of commissions on some of these items. And so that's where it started. And then I let it sit dormant. And then one day I logged into my Amazon Associates account, which I was probably monitoring like for the other site. And I saw like a really big bump because at the time I was making few bucks a day, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw like a really big, like $70 commission or something. And I was like, what the heck happened? And so I went in and I realized it was one of these expensive items from this site that I hadn't thought about in like 4 months. And so that re-energized me. I was like, oh yeah, you know, I forgot about that. And maybe we should redo that. And so at the time I was a little bit overwhelmed, just with a lot going on and all that. And so, my cousin is actually on this topic, is much more of an expert than I am. And so I knew he just naturally knew a lot about it and might be interested in learning. He'd never done a site. He didn't know anything about this. He'd be one of those people that, like I mentioned before, that's like a smart person. But if you said, hey, how does a website rank in Google? He would have given you some really stupid answer at the time. So he knew nothing.
Right.
But I had him over to my house and kind of pitched him on this idea of like, hey, I've got this thing. You know, like I know how to do the strategy part and the marketing part. If you'll do the content, we'll be like 50-50 partners. And like, I really think, I remember this actually, I told him, I was like, laid out this whole strategy. We watched these training videos together. And I was like, I really think we can get this to something where it could make $10,000 a month. And he was like, okay, you know, and kind of walked out. And he confessed to me later, like a year or so later, he was like, I remember when you said that. And I went to my car thinking, he's out of his mind. Like, that's impossible.
Jake's lost it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he was thinking. But nevertheless, he was like, yeah, I'll do it, you know? And so it was really helpful because we kind of had accountability to each other. You know, we were both chipping in and both kind of had our things we were doing. And so in those early days, it was super helpful. So we got things done faster and we were on a really tight budget. So the site just grew and grew and started doing some interesting things I'd never done before, as far as got a Pinterest account, because there is a side to this site that's fits really well with Pinterest and certain audiences there. And so kind of picked up that skill and learned it a little bit and drove some traffic that was not Google traffic, which was first for me. So that was the approach we took with the site. We kind of had like, I thought of it almost like divided in two. We had stuff that was like affiliate content, you know, a lot of buying guides for these things, these items that we were talking about. And then we had more of like the shareable, like social media side of it, where we did like fun topics and a lot of, you know, big lists of ideas and stuff like that that we thought were very shareable, and just saw that as a way to get traffic into the website. And so that's kind of how we were building it out in the early days, and it really picked up some steam.
So to recap a little bit here, it sounds like you started the site, put 5 to 10 articles maybe up there in the first month, and then forgot about it for 4 or 5 months, just let it sit for a while, and then saw that nice bump in commissions. And so you came back to it re-energized with effort. Do you remember how long it was before the site was making, let's say, $500 a month on a sort of regular basis, or hit that milestone?
Once we when we dove back into it, what we committed to was we're going to publish, I think it was 30 articles in the next 30 days. And so we were going to do 15 a piece, right? Like one every other day. And we hit that mark. And we were using at the time, mixing in the content. What we had watched was the Digital Marketer Lab videos. They've got a little course out there about like great content that you can create quickly or something like that. And so we were sort of mixing, like giving a variety of content, just trying to get it up and going. And so that gave us a nice little influx of content. So really, I would say within about the next 5-6 months, you know, we were up to those kind of numbers, you know, $500 a month, something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, it didn't take too long because I think we were kind of already out of the sandbox and that sort of thing. So when we came back and hit it hard, I think stuff started to rank fairly quickly.
Okay. So maybe let's call it 10 months after creating the site, something like that, right?
Something like, yep.
Okay. Hitting about $500 a month. And you're probably not going to remember any of these numbers, but do you remember, I mean, was it a big jump after that? Do you remember when you hit like $1,000 a month? Kind of give us, how it snowballed from there.
Yeah, I remember it must have been, I guess the years are fuzzy. I mean, I think it was around the end of 2015. You know, we were doing 1,100, 1,200, 1,500, like kind of throughout mid 2015. And I think in December we hit like our first $3,000 month of that year. Like, and it was all just Amazon affiliate commissions. And so that was like a really big deal, you know, like that's a big amount of money, you know? And so we were super excited about that. That was more than I had ever made from any site at that point in a month. And so, but it just kept growing from there. I kind of expected a little bit of a December fall off, but I remember, in January it dipped by just like a couple $100 or something. We did like 2,800, and then from then on out, like we did over 3,000 every month throughout 2016. And then once we got to like the holiday season of 2016, it kind of doubled again, and it went to like 6,000 in December of that year, like the following year, and it was the same story again in 2017. We got up to where we were over 6-7 neighborhood like all of last year. And then by the end of the year, we did like 13,000 or so in December of 2017, which was a phenomenal number, right? Like we were doing over 10,000 a month by like the fall time last year. And so then based on the numbers I just gave you a minute ago, like you can see how it's kind of snowballed from there. Obviously we've been reinvesting a lot in more content and stuff like that, and really just trying to grow a little bit more aggressively. And so, so far in 2018, we're way outpacing 2017. So
yeah,
needless to say, I'm excited for Christmas.
see what level you can get to at this Christmas. I agree.
Right. Yeah. Cause I mean, I don't even want to like tease my mind with this thought, but what I basically just told you was that over the last 3 years, like December has always been about double what our typical month was that year. So like, if that's the case this year, I'm just going to, take a trip to Hawaii or something to celebrate. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Just buy your own island over there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where that stopped, so I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but obviously, as the holidays are always a good time to be sending traffic to Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. So give us an idea of how much content you have on the site. I know that first month you sort of cranked out 30 articles. Did you guys get on a consistent publishing schedule at that point for like number of articles per month, that sort of thing?
I would love to say that we did, but we didn't. We after we really pushed through that 30, like we were a little bit here and there. So like I've bounced around from having, we went through a really nice stretch there where I found a great writer on Upwork, a guy who was a substitute teacher down in Florida. And like, he just like, I don't know, every once in a while, Upwork can be a little bit hit or miss, but every once in a while you find somebody who's just like perfect. And this guy really got like the tone of the site that we were going for. And like, he wrote it like better than we could have done ourselves as far as just really capturing like who we wanted it to sound like. And so we started sending him our content, but it wasn't like a service or something, he was kind of doing it like as he could. And so I was like, hey, whatever pace you can is great. So we were probably adding, some months 2 articles, some months 5, you know what I mean? Like a pretty slow pace, but it was all really good stuff. And so we were growing kind of slow and steady. Like I said, we had pretty consistent numbers, like $3,000 every month, and it's like, okay, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Spending whatever, 150 or 200 on new content. So it's obviously great profit margin there. And then over the last year or so, we've really gotten more serious about doing like bulk orders. So we've tried a couple of content services with mixed results, but we've tried to just sort of scale up, because at some point you get so many keyword ideas and so much content that you want to do that it's really nice to have somebody who you like who's doing 1 or 2 a month. But you start projecting that out and you think, oh man, I'm going to get through all these ideas in 2054 or something, and the numbers just don't work. So you got to start scaling up. And we were making enough to warrant that, so we started taking on bigger expenses for content, and it's really been paying off.
Do you know the rough number of total posts that you have on the site now?
Oh yeah, sorry. It looks like we've got 367 articles on the site right now.
Okay, gives people an idea. So that's a lot of content.
Yeah. And I would say probably half that has been in the last year.
Okay. Really ramped it up in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Good. So what do you think, rather than sort of beat around the bush, like what's the secret of the success? Like what's the secret sauce for the site?
Well, I think that I really do think that there's magic in at the time I didn't know there was magic in it, but now I believe that there's like a reason for this, in the idea of not just thinking of your site as an affiliate site. And I did a post on Niche Pursuits a while back about, I think I called it like the incognito affiliate.
Right.
Incognito affiliate, basically being an affiliate site without just screaming that I'm an affiliate site. I think those are what the best guys do. And so you really feel more like a brand or like a media site, where being an affiliate is part of what you do, but it doesn't define the site. And so for our site, we went into it thinking, okay, we're going to use Pinterest and we're going to use these like really shareable topics, where at the time we weren't using an ad network or anything. Like we literally weren't making any money from those posts. Like the pages that were getting the most traffic on our site were making like $0. Like unless somebody just happened to click over to like an affiliate post afterward or something and go buy something, which I'm sure was extremely rare. But I thought it was worthwhile because I felt like it was helping us in Google. Like we were ranking for stuff really well. And I was like, if we can just keep getting more and more traffic, like maybe eventually we'll figure out a way to build an email list or something to like make money off of this. So, as I say, I didn't have this really well thought out strategy at the beginning, but I'm glad we did it that way. So I would really encourage people to do that when possible. Is like, don't do just affiliate content. Like, you want to look legit and you want to build like a real readership. Like you want to have stuff that people are like happy to share on social media. Like you need to have like a steady diet of that type of content too. I think to really kind of take your site to the next level.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Do you have like a ratio of this is how much affiliate content versus other types of content, shareable or informational type stuff that you'll do?
I kind of do everything by gut feeling, to be honest. Not big on ratios. Jason, if you ask Jason that question, he probably had some kind of mathematical formula that he pulled out. He said, well, get out your calculator. Take your affiliate post, divide by 12, whatever. But just teasing Jason. But anyway, so not really. I would say like it was probably for a long time, maybe about half of our content is affiliate content, maybe, because we did like a lot of affiliate content this past year. But right now, like we've got this big order of we're getting like 75 articles that are more like instructional type articles, like how-to type stuff that's a fit for our audience. So we're trying to balance that out a little bit because I feel like we got a little affiliate heavy over the last 6 months. So prior to that, I'm just going to say maybe a half and half mix. But again, like our non-affiliate stuff was driving most of our traffic, but our affiliate stuff did really, really well because we were ranking well for like really expensive stuff. So it made money. But the other thing that kind of turned the corner for us, honestly, like we would never be where we are today. In October of last year is when we first eclipsed $10,000 in a month. And the only reason we did that is because I found out about AdThrive. And so I think we all kind of jumped onto these more premium ad networks like AdThrive and Mediavine here in the last year or so. And it's really been a game changer for the site because, as I said, in the olden days, like we had those Pinteresty type posts and I used to have like some AdSense ads on them. And like nobody ever clicked on them. Like I was making whatever. We make $3,000 from Amazon and make like $20 from AdSense. And I was like, this is stupid, So I just took it down because I was like, it's just in people's way. It's not even worth that. And so when I heard some people in some of our, our Niche Pursuits Insider group and things like that were kind of raving about AdThrive, I was like, what the heck? I'll give it a shot. And so they told me that they could just put their ads on my non-affiliate content. So I was like, hey, I don't want to mess with the Amazon stuff, but if I can figure out a way to make some money from this stuff where I'm making $0 right now, that'll just be icing on the cake, right? And so in October, I tried that out. And I remember after they installed their ads and they sent me the dashboard for the first time, we were making like an extra $70 a day at the time. Off of stuff we were making nothing. Yeah. So I mean, I was sitting right here where I'm talking to you now. I almost fell out of my chair. I just couldn't believe it. And then I felt like an idiot because it wasn't like this stuff was invented yesterday, and I'm thinking my mind immediately goes to, geez, how much money did I leave on the table this whole year? But needless to say, it's grown significantly since then because our page views are way up since then. So like that's become like a huge spoke in the wheel of what we are today. Like the numbers that we talk about, like that's probably, I don't know, AdThrive makes up more than a third of that.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's big time. So I mean, we wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are without adding that in there. So that's a great way to, like, I don't know, if you're thinking affiliate site, like if you think this other stuff that I'm talking about, the high traffic stuff, the Pinterest, all that, like it definitely can pay off. Like I've learned a lot about that over the last year. Like we've seen some of these like mom bloggers and food bloggers and some of these groups. I'm just blown away. Like they pretty much do all Pinterest. Like they don't know anything about Google, and they do all AdThrive, and they make insane amounts of money. I mean, I'm blown away by it. So my eyes have been open there.
Yeah, it's been really eye-opening for me too, seeing the mom bloggers that you mentioned. Of course, I bought a mom blog in March of this year, 5-6 months ago, and just seeing the strategies that they use, it's a completely different world. Different world. Like the person I bought the mom blog from, she essentially never thought or cared about Google whatsoever, like not one iota. She just worried about Pinterest. Is her stuff shareable? She's getting loads and loads of traffic, and it's just monetized, with AdThrive. And so for these ad networks, for people listening, AdThrive and Mediavine, of course, you do have to have a certain number of page views before you can be approved to use those. It's like 25,000 a month, I think, for Mediavine, and then maybe 100,000 a month for AdThrive.
That's right.
And so you do need to have, reach a certain level before you can do that, but it's a great option to look at. So
for sure.
To continue to dive in just a little bit more, I mean, are we missing anything else? I mean, we haven't talked about link building for this specific site. Maybe you give us an idea of, how important is that, based on your previous answers. I think I already know that, but, link building or anything else that you feel like has really helped the site do well.
Yeah, I don't have like this big time case study data to prove it, but I really do think that when we started pinning stuff on Pinterest and like getting repinned and like kind of getting somewhat popular on Pinterest, that really helped our Google rankings. Like stuff started ranking better and started ranking faster, and that all it definitely happened at the same time. And so I guess one could argue maybe that's coincidental, but I know of other people that have seen the same. And so it's not really link building, because those are no follow links, but there are like a lot of no follow links. And I think there's a lot of like credibility that comes from that because it was real, like it wasn't like we were out there buying followers or anything. Like we were getting pinned by like, people that have like influence on Pinterest. And so I think that was really helpful. Outside of that, like we really haven't done, I'm going to say, any intentional link building on that site. Now we've picked up some nice links along the way and most of it's to that type of content, stuff that's really shareable because it gets shared and then people will just kind of discover it. And then like, I'll find out that somebody mentioned it in an article, and so it's turned out to be great for link building too, but that was just a byproduct really of the original strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know people are probably listening and they're like, man, he's got a site that's making over 20,000 a month. What's the secret sauce? Right. And sort of what we're sharing, I guess, is the secret sauce, but there's no like super secret thing you're doing other than, hey, you have been building this site for 5 years, been putting a lot of consistent effort, producing great content, doing some shareable content, working on Pinterest. It's all of these things combined. Just it works.
Yeah, I would say another maybe element of secret sauce, if you will, that works well for this site is it's fairly wide. Like it's in a niche, but it was wide enough to allow us to logically expand. Like when I wanted to do new keywords and find more keywords that we could go after, I didn't have a problem this past year finding 50 more like buying guide, affiliate style keywords to go after that fit with our site. And so like if you start out too narrow, you're just talking about water heaters, or I'm just talking about whatever, bike tires or something that's really specific. Like what you have to think about is like, you're going to get to a point, even if you rank number one for like everything that you're thinking, there's still like a pretty limited ceiling there, and we were at that point for a while with the site where it was like, okay, well, like we were doing fine, like making a few $1,000 a month, which is great. But I was like, well, we're already like sitting at whatever, the top 5 of Google for like everything we want to be sitting at the top 5 of Google for. So like, how do we improve, And so the only answer to me was more content,
Right.
And so we were in a wide enough space to where we were able to do that. So if you get tapped out too early and you can't do that, I'm not saying that anything's wrong with having a site that makes $1,000 or $2,000 a month. Like, that can be a life-changing amount of money. But if you want to get to a site that's making, big money, it's got to have room to grow, room to expand. And that's something that a decision you make up front when you're picking a niche. And so it's really important that you don't pigeonhole yourself too tightly.
I agree with that. The other point that I should make is, we're sort of saying it just takes consistent effort, write the content and things will happen. I mean, there is a very specific process I know that you follow for producing the content in terms of how long should it be, what sort of sub keywords, additional keywords are you also targeting throughout the article, what sort of sub headlines are you using and the structure. Right. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit, but I know that's definitely part of the process.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. The first thing is I try to find, most of what we've done, like the keywords that I find, and we talk about this all the time, like doppelganger sites and stuff like that, is I almost always start by looking for weak websites. And what I mean by that is just sites that don't have a huge history, don't have a lot of authority, whether you're looking at like the domain rating in Ahrefs or the domain authority from Moz, numbers like that, like they score pretty low on that. However, they're still ranking for a lot of the stuff that I would want to rank for. Mm-hmm. I just look at those guys, and SEMrush is my tool of choice. And I just go down and just pull every keyword that looks interesting to me, and I just put it in a spreadsheet. And you kind of go down that rabbit hole and you find several of those, and all of a sudden you look down and you've got 75 or 100 keywords to go after.
Yep.
And now you're busy for 6 months, And so that's how it started. And really, I've kind of just done the same things. We've grown. You kind of go back, look at that with new eyes 6 months later, and I do it in big binges like that, And then from there, like, that's the biggest thing, because like, if you're targeting stuff that's way too competitive, we would have never ranked to start with. I don't think it would have really mattered how great the content was personally. So we started by doing the right keywords. And then from there, like, you kind of develop a tone of voice of the site. And I think something that's really important when you're hiring writers, again, this is something that I've gotten better at, but I'm still not great at, is really explaining to them, giving them a template of like, here's roughly how long the intro should be. If we're talking about products, here's how many products we want to cover, 5 to 7 or whatever. If you want to have them answer specific questions inside the article, like, tell them that, you know what I mean? Like, giving really specific instructions, because if you just say, hey, go write me an article about whatever, I'm looking at a tree outside, the best tree fertilizer, right? Mm-hmm. Like, who knows what you're going to get? Even if they're a great writer, like, you've got to set out what you're looking for. And so we've gotten a lot better at getting a really consistent output there. And I think that's helped us, just helped us kind of, we don't have a whole lot of duds. Like, most of the stuff we put out ranks, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So great information. I appreciate you sitting down with me, sharing what's working well for your site and the success that you're having there. Hopefully people listening in have found some value there. We didn't really have a chance to talk about it, but most people are aware that you are working for me and have been working for me full time for the last few years. But with the site making as much as it is now, I mean, when's that going to end? I mean, at some point, right, I would assume you're going to go out on your own and sort of do that full time, right?
Well, that's the hope. I mean, that's why we're probably everybody listening to me right now is listening to this because they're hoping to do that too at some point. So the good news is, like I mentioned before, when I got married, I was working at Citibank, and you're completely miserable and you wake up every day like wishing you could just go back to sleep. I don't have that situation anymore. So when you do something that you enjoy, there's a lot less urgency. And so obviously, we have a good time and we work on some fun stuff. So, but yeah, I've kind of got a rough goal in my mind to be in that position and, around the turn of the next year, beginning of 2019. So I think I'm in a place now where I could probably do it right away and be okay, but I'm trying to be ultra conservative. I've got a mortgage and I've got 3 kids and a wife and all of that. And so just want to make sure that that things are buttoned up. I think everybody in our space is always a little bit paranoid. What if Amazon bans my account tomorrow? What if Google does their next update tomorrow and my site disappears and all that sort of stuff? So you want to make sure that everything is you've got some money saved up and before you do anything too risky. So I'm working that way, and hopefully we'll get there.
Absolutely. And of course, you're able to work flexible hours and work sort of the schedule that you want. And so, of course, we've talked about when that will be, and I'm super excited. I love that both Jake and Jason are doing well with their sites and are able to grow that business on their side, sort of on the side of what they're doing full time with me. And eventually you guys will be able to go out on your own and continue to grow those. So,
yep.
Any final words for Niche Pursuits listeners before we close the podcast here?
Well, I would just say, hang in there, guys. Like I know we say that a lot, but a lot of pretty much every site that I talked about today, like there was a period of time, either months or years, where like I started it and then kind of forgot about it, and then just something came about. In one case, it was a conversation with my sister. In another case, it was a random sale on Amazon, something like that brought my attention back to it and kind of re-energized me. So I think even those that see some success have had periods of time where they got bored with it or got discouraged or whatever. The biggest part is just following some kind of system, like the stuff that we talk about has worked well for me, obviously, and then sticking with it is the biggest thing. And that's what most people won't do. So that's what's going to separate you and help you be successful for sure.
I think that's great advice. It's something that's worked as well for me, just being able to stick with different projects and see the results that come as you put forth the effort and do that. So, Jake, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, sharing your background. You'll be on future podcasts, of course, as a co-host, but it's good to get your story and hear about your sites as well. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Had a good time.
And everybody listening, thank you. And you can follow along at nichepursuits.com. Thanks a lot. Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of the Niche Pursuits podcast. If you want to hear more from Jake and get some additional tips, I've actually created an in-depth training course called Organic Traffic Formula, where Jake, Jason, and I all sit down, have created in-depth video training modules, given our standard operating procedures, spreadsheets, checklists, and a whole lot more. You can find out more about that training course at nichepursuits.com/training. So I hope you'll go ahead and check that out at nichepursuits.com/training. Thanks a lot.